We all know that migration is not easy, and especially to one country. But my today's guest has migrated to three different countries. He migrated from India to Nigeria, from Nigeria to US, and from US to Australia. He finally settled in Australia and made Australia his home. But in his migration journey, there was a lot of struggles, not just struggles for identity, prove himself, making his own career, making his employment, as well as fulfilling his own desires to do something that can impact others' lives. So my today's guest is very, very special, who talks about a lot of things. He talks about sustainability, climate change, progress, career guidance, as well as he is the writer of the book, The Art of Winging It. And this book, I've read the book, and that book is one of my favorite now. So please welcome 40 under 40 most influencer Asian Australian and a TEDx speaker, Dr. Kaushik Sridhar. Hello, Dr. Kaushik. How are you today?
Hey, Krunal. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I am good, thank you. So our audience is pretty excited and thrilled to know more about you. So could you please introduce yourself and your new entrepreneurship and the author that the book you wrote? So we are pretty excited to know that. So can you please get started with that?
Yeah, sure, Krunal. And also, firstly, just thank you for having me on your podcast. I think this is pretty cool, and I'm really excited to have this chat with you.
Thanks a lot.
I think your introduction of me was pretty good. So I'm from
Thanks.
South India, from Chennai. I was born in a little
Hmm.
village near Chennai and moved to Africa at the age of 3
Wow.
with my parents. We moved to West
Okay.
Africa, which is Nigeria.
Hmm.
And then at the age of 6, Krunal, I picked up a tennis racket. And then at 12, I became number one for tennis in
Wow,
Nigeria. And
that's
so at
great.
13, Krunal, I moved to the United States
Hmm.
on a tennis scholarship. So I left my parents at a very young age and pretty much had to learn how to
So
live.
you moved by yourself.
I did. I moved to a tennis academy. So I was taken away by
Right.
a very famous Australian tennis player.
Right.
He's
Nice.
retired
Nice.
now. So he
Mm-hmm.
sent some scouts around the world to try and find top talent. And
Mm-hmm.
in Africa, they picked me as one of like four people. And then yeah. Anyway, I started my tennis career at that age and played
Mm-hmm.
around the world. Krunal played some very famous Indian players that I think many of
Mm-hmm.
your audience and yourself might know quite well. Um, and
Yes, we want to know like who you played with as well,
Yeah,
please.
okay. So I played, Mahesh Bhupathi, Leander Paes. So they're like some of the, the home names for
Mm-hmm.
tennis in India. So I was very
Mm-hmm.
fortunate to grow up with them as my
Great.
like teammates, if you want to call it that. And then I came to Australia, Cronulla, when I was 22. I came here to work
Yeah.
as a tennis coach, actually, with a lady
Mm-hmm.
named Margaret Court. You may have heard of her. She has a stadium
Yes,
named
yes,
after
yes, yes,
her.
Margaret. Yes, 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 yes,
And
of
so
course.
she brought me to Australia from America to be a tennis coach.
Mm-hmm.
That was at the age of 22, Krunal.
At the 20,
And then
at the age of 22, you were coaching Australian kids.
yeah, I was coaching kids, adults, so 3-year-olds, 83-year-olds, people with different communication styles, different
Mm-hmm.
egos, different requirements, different
Yes,
needs. So if you
yes.
ask me, what is the highlight of my career till today,
Mm.
that job was actually the highlight because what I learned
Wow.
very quickly was how to communicate with different people, how to do
Mm-hmm.
stakeholder engagement, and how to
Mm-hmm.
align different people on a common vision or a common purpose.
Yep.
So for that, I'm very grateful to that job. It sounds like it has nothing to do with business or management, but it's actually the
No,
best
no,
job
it
that I've
is.
ever
It
had.
is actually, yes, it is a professional job. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. And then literally the next chapter of my life, Chronol, came into the space that I work in today. So I
Mm-hmm.
work in the space of sustainability, climate change, human rights, ESG, etc. How I got into that field is another story. If you would like
That's the
to know, I
next
can talk
question.
about
Next
it. But
question.
I've spent the last
Yes.
Oh, is it? So I guess you mentioned my book earlier, and the book is called The
Yep.
Art of Winging It. Now, everyone
Okay.
says they wing it in life, which is kind of just go with the
Mhm.
flow. But my
Yep.
life, I have actually winged it. So, you talk about tennis to the boardroom. There's no better way
Mm-hmm.
to wing it than going from an athlete to a businessman, and
Right.
being reasonably successful in both without having a manual or a plan. So when I was coaching Krunal, in Albury Wodonga, I quickly realized I had lost my passion for tennis.
Oh.
And one of the reasons for that, Krunal, is, and I'm happy to share this with your audience because I've done a TED talk on this, and it's important for this conversation. When I
Mm-hmm.
left my parents at the age of 13. Now imagine this. I'm guessing you have children, Krunal.
Yes, I do have a child. Yes.
How old's your child?
She is at this moment she's 9, 8 years, and
She's
completing 9. Yes.
9 years. So okay, 9.
Sure.
Um, Imagine this. You've got one child. My
Yep.
parents had one child. I left them at a very young age. So
At the
they're
age
in
of 12.
Africa and I'm in the United States. Imagine your child leaving you, right? At a very young
Mm.
age.
Yep.
We almost died in a plane crash, by the way, on the way to America. That's a different story. But once we got to Texas, they left me and they came back to Africa. So there's like
Africa.
thousands of kilometers between us.
Mm.
Every night, Krunal, for 365 days, so a whole year, every night, six Caucasian boys, 2 to 3 times my size, beat me
Mm-hmm. What?
physically.
Every day.
Um, every night. First, it was emotional
And
bullying and emotional
why was
racism.
that? Why
So
was
you know
that?
the oil in my hair, the
Yes.
vibhuti on my forehead, the clothing that
Yes.
I wore, the skin of,
Yep.
the color of my skin, my accent,
Mm-hmm.
everything was an issue for the first few days. But then after that, it became really physical.
Hmm.
And so how that manifested again is another story. But my passion
Yep.
for tennis diminished rapidly. So if that had not happened, I would have been bigger than Payas and Bhupati, almost guaranteed. But unfortunately, when that happened, at the age of 23, when I was coaching Australian kids and other nationalities here in Australia, I quickly
Mm-hmm.
realized that I hated tennis. I actually hated it. And so I quit. I quit my job.
Even you were good at it, you still hated it.
I hated it.
And
I
just
quit
because of that just because of the incident happened to you earlier.
many things along the way, but that was one of the
One of the incident, yeah. One of the
initial
reasons, one of the reasons,
milestones.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the reasons. So I actually quit my job, packed my bags, and I came to Sydney to do an MBA at Macquarie University. Now, I'm not a fan of education. I don't like studying. I actually did an MBA to have fun. I didn't do it
Right.
for, career or salary or anything like that. But it was
Mm-hmm.
while doing my MBA and I was partying with my friends. I got an internship opportunity with a very
Right.
famous company listed in America, and the internship was around sustainability or
Okay.
environment. I actually
Mm-hmm.
rejected it 3 times because I didn't believe in sustainability or climate change at that time.
Right.
I wanted
At
to
that
work in
point.
sales, marketing, finance, the typical
Pretty much,
subjects
yes,
that
yes.
we,
Kind
we
of
care
business
about.
thing and yeah, entrepreneur, a traditional MBA thing you say. Yep.
Traditional, exactly,
Yep.
Colonel. But I was convinced by the university to go
Mm-hmm.
to the company and listen to the vice president at the time, what was her vision for
Mm-hmm.
sustainability and what was her vision for the internship. So that was
Yeah.
2008, Colonel. So we go back 15 years ago now.
Right.
15 years later, I am in that space. So I guess, I've done an MBA, I've done a PhD, I've worked in consulting companies like KPMG, EY, I worked in ASX companies, I've taught at universities like Melbourne, RMIT, La Trobe, and I write for newspapers, magazines, I've written a book. And I guess you might say you've done a lot, or why do you do these things? I don't do these things for any other reason
Mm-hmm.
because I have fun with it and it gives me some meaning and purpose. And
Yep.
that's really it. Nothing else. I don't like to work too hard. I'm not very ambitious, but I love to have fun. So
Fine.
anything I do
That's
has to have an element of fun to it. So that's why
exactly.
I've still stuck to this space because in sustainability, you can actually make an impact on a person's life. You can
Yep.
make an impact on your community. You can make an
Mm-hmm.
impact on the environment.
Yep.
And not many professions can say they do that. And whereas in my profession, I do that on a daily basis, which gives me a lot of
Daily
happiness.
basis,
So that's
yes.
why I do what I
Yes.
do.
That gives you internal happiness. That's something you wanted
Exactly.
to do, right?
That's
Correct,
right.
correct. So I just got a question here. See, firstly, I'm thinking that this podcast is going to be really phenomenal, because the way you explain your experiences and what you had and what and how you change your career and that. I will be asking you interesting questions, and I would love to hear your story. But whatever you just told me into your introduction, that's fascinating. That's fascinating, and I trust that I have, like, huge. I just became a huge fan of yours. Trust me on
Oh, Krunal,
that.
thank you. I'm a fan of
Great.
you.
So
You're a cool
what
man.
within this short span of lifetime, let's say you started at 12 and 22 you came to Australia, and within that, you started your MBA, and now whatever you're doing, it's fantastic. I haven't seen, like, very less people doing this at these, in that short time span. So firstly, great, and I'm pretty impressed with your career. And yes, a sad
Thank
incidents
you.
happen to you. That's have a feel sorry for that. That shouldn't happen at all. And
Please don't feel
okay.
sorry. If I can just add to
Mm,
that, Krunal,
yeah.
if you
But
look
as
at
a
my
kid,
book,
you are in pain. Like, when that things happens to you, then it. I don't know who is anybody to question, any actions, or anybody, offered any help. But as a kid, at a 12-year-old child, what you were feeling at that point,
mm,
that's something. I'm feeling sorry for that child, not for you right now, but I'm feeling for that child, 12-year old child, who felt
yeah,
those incidences every day, and
mm,
that's not great, so okay.
mm.
But that's happened, that's okay.
I
But
did want to
let's
share,
move on.
Krunal, just
Yes, please,
briefly.
please.
I did want to
Yeah.
share, I appreciate the sympathy for my 12-year-old, and many people do say that to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you mentioned my book earlier, and page two, there's an acknowledgements page. The
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement, if you read it, it doesn't go to my wife, my parents, my colleagues, my boss. It doesn't go to any of the typical people that you would think an acknowledgement would go to. My
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement
And
goes to the
it's good.
bullies. It goes to the
Wow.
6 boys in in America who did what they did to me. It goes to the racists and the bullies that I face in corporate Australia. It
Mm-hmm.
goes to all the bullies in my life that I face till today at the age of 39, and that I started facing at the age of 12. And the reason I thank them in my acknowledgement is not because of the negative stuff, but it's because, and this is not promoting bullying, I wish this on no one in this world, but what happened is what made me who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And I am literally unbreakable. Um, there's two ways that people will absorb such incidents.
Could you
One is,
please, yes, I want to know, like,
sure,
how you developed this thought process.
sure. So there's three ways people can take this incident.
Yeah.
When you have, imagine 6 boys over you on a single bed, beating you like there is no tomorrow. Imagine you go to a conference in corporate Australia, and I see this, by the way, even today. As
Yeah.
a Indian brown person going into a room full of Caucasians, immediately I'm
Hmm.
socially isolated. Subtle racism, right? People do
Right.
that. And then I go on stage to speak, and they're shocked that that is that person who's going to speak. These things give me a lot of strength. So the
Right.
reason, I guess, when you think about it, at 12 years old, I had three choices. My first
Hmm.
choice was to kill myself.
Right.
Many people will do that. I'm sure many people would have chosen that path.
Understand that. Completely
The
understand
second
that. Yes.
choice would be to go and tell someone and say that they have some
Think more
trauma
about it.
or
Yeah.
mental health issues or anxiety, which is completely fair.
Hmm.
The third option is what I choose. I chose to deal with it myself. I'm an only child. When I was raised
Yes.
by my parents, I was raised with a very protected, typical Indian upbringing. So I
Indian
didn't know
mentality.
right from wrong. I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't have much exposure. So when I was dropped in Texas and I was
Hmm.
going through these incidents, I actually had the real world in my face screaming at me saying, "Kaushik, this is the real world, not what you're having back in Nigeria with your mom and dad. So what are you going
Correct.
to do about it?" And so what I
Yes.
did, Krunal, is I just dealt with it myself. Now the negative that came out of these incidents was my tennis went down. But the positive that came out of this is it made me resilient, agile, nimble, stress free, very relaxed, but very low tolerance to bullies. So today, if I see bullying from anyone, whether you're an ASX CEO, chairman, famous person, a cleaner, my colleague, a student, or a teacher, One of the things
Yep.
that I will do is I will ensure that you are no longer a bully.
And how you do it.
And how do I do it is not something you really want to know. It's with a smile, but my wife can
Right.
validate where she says, I will absolutely destroy that person with my words.
Great. Great. And that's something you developed just because of the experiences you had earlier, right?
It's a principle of fairness and equity. That is something that was put in me at the age of 13.
Right. So now tell me about this sustainability work you're doing. And see, for a lot of people, the term itself is not familiar. And most of
Oh,
the my podcast audience is like, from migrant background. So they don't know
yeah.
what's going on in Australia. They're new here. So could you please elaborate, like what as a work, what you do every day?
Yeah, absolutely, Colonel. And you're right,
Thank you.
sustainability is quite new, but it's
Quite
also quite old. And the terminology has obviously changed over the decades.
over the decades.
So, over the past 16 years, Colonel, as I mentioned to you, I've worked in consulting, I've worked in corporate, I've worked in universities. And fundamentally, what I do for a living or what I teach is that previously, the primary purpose of any company's existence was to make profits, was to
Correct.
make money and maximize shareholder
Absolutely.
returns.
Yep.
Typical capitalism. And that's
Yep.
fine. There's nothing wrong with that because if that doesn't happen, sustainability cannot happen. So that's financial sustainability.
Yep.
In my work, in my teaching, in my lectures, I guess what I try to share with my network is that there's also an element called non-financial sustainability. So any
And what is that?
company, anyone that does something to make some money will obviously have an impact on the planet. It'll have an impact on the environment.
Correct.
And it could
Yes.
potentially also have an impact on the community and the society. So the way that I explain what I do is think of a stool with three legs. You need the three legs for the stool to stand. So one leg
Yep.
is profit and economic. The second
Correct.
leg is environment. The third leg is the social. Any one leg breaks off and the stool is imbalanced. So my
Imbalanced, yes.
job in any
Right.
company is to make sure the three legs are looked at in a very balanced manner. So I've worked in healthcare, work in
Mm-hmm.
mining, I work in professional services. So any company that I work for or any client that I consult to, this is kind of the mindset that I try to bring um, into the work that I do. So hopefully that gives you a summary, a high
Yeah,
level summary
perfect.
of what I
I
do.
got it. Yes, yes. So you coach the companies, the businesses, existing businesses, and how did they develop the sustainability in three legs of sustainability in their company.
Yes.
So that's your main job, right? And if someone, one of the clients or anyone who is viewing this job, if they want to get your services or they want to reach out to you, how they can reach out to you? Is there some sort of website you have or anything?
I mean, I am actually fully employed at the moment,
Right.
but I do have a website which is basically my name. So it's
Yep.
kaushik.sridhar.com.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, you can always come check out the website, and I try and put a few articles there and a few podcast interviews and other thought leadership that people can come and actually see, some of the work that I've done, and definitely can get in touch that way.
Perfect, perfect. So, thank you very much, Dr. Kaushik, for this little introduction about yourself. So, I'm moving to our next segment, which is
Sure.
your migration part. So,
Yep.
let's say you have been a migrant. So, you from India, you and your family moved to Nigeria, and from Nigeria you went to US, and then you came to Australia.
That's
So,
right.
so this is quite intense migrant journey, isn't it?
It
So
is.
how do you feel as a migrant, like in by going to these many countries and living in those different places? Even in Australia, you've been not living in one place, right? So let's start
Yep.
from Australia. Just because of we trying to help the Australian migrants here. So
Yep.
as you came in as at the age of 22, when you came in
Yep.
Australia, how did you came in? You came in as a permanent resident, or somebody sponsored you, or you came here to study?
Yeah, so when I came in Krunal to be a tennis coach, I was actually sponsored on a work visa. And that was my first entry point into Australia. And
Great.
from there, I guess when I transitioned to do the MBA, I then moved into a student visa. And then from the student visa, again, got sponsored for a work visa in sustainability, went back to a student visa to do a PhD, and then
Oh,
came
wow.
back to a sponsorship visa to be a consultant with Ernst& Young, and then from there,
Right.
permanent residency a few years later, and then citizenship a few years later.
Cool, cool, cool. So at what stage after, like, what year you came in Australia, when you were 22? What,
2006.
2006?
Yeah.
And how long it took you to become a resident here? But I know for you, it's being a resident wasn't an ultimate aim, which usual migrants are coming with that mindset to become quickly
Yep.
resident and a citizen. But yes, if from your career, your growth and everything, the studies you're doing, your intention was not to get a residency or citizenship, right? Am I right? Yes.
100%.
So yeah, okay. So tell me about and tell us about this. Like how was the entire journey? You explained that. Was it smooth? Like from the perspective of migrants' perspective, was it a smooth journey or it was a little bumpy ride? And switching the visas, sponsored to student, student to sponsored again, and getting a residency. Was that a hurdle for you, or it was someone else was like taking looking after that?
Um, it's interesting, isn't it, Krunal? Again, I come back to the title of my book, The Art of Winging It. I just
Correct.
winged my Australian journey. I
Yeah,
didn't have migration agents. I didn't have a
right.
plan. I didn't really want to get a residency. I just kind of wanted to float and just see what came my way. And if something came, great. If not, I'll go somewhere else. That was kind of the mindset. To get a student visa was easy. That was not a challenge because if you can
No.
prove, you've got some income or etc., then I think the student visa,
Intention.
and if you've
Basically,
obviously got
genuine intention. Yeah.
accepted in university, etc., getting
Yeah.
sponsorship work visa is very difficult. It's very difficult because you've got to find that employer who's willing to take a chance on you, who
Correct.
recognizes your talent, and you've got to be something unique in the marketplace for them to be willing to sponsor you. So for me, when I did a PhD, Krunal, many people said do not do a PhD because they said that I would be seen as a threat in the corporate world. They would see me as someone who was an
Correct.
overachiever or very academic or someone who can't really talk the industry or corporate language. But interestingly, and again, I didn't do a PhD to be called a doctor. In fact, I hate being called doctor. I did a PhD just to understand a little bit more about sustainability and again have fun as a student because I knew that if anything, that was my last chapter as a student. But getting the PhD was really valuable because many smaller consulting companies and larger consulting companies, they saw the PhD at the time in the field that I did it in as something very niche, very unique. And they felt that sustainability, ESG, there wasn't a lot of doctorate people in Australia who could
In that.
really articulate that subject in that space at that time. So it actually worked out really well in terms of being able to get a work sponsorship in a consulting company to drive impact in that sustainability space. So again, I was very lucky. I never did a PhD for the visa, but the visa came to me because of the PhD.
Yes, correct, correct. So, as from the Australian immigration department point of view, you
Yeah.
could have been a genuine student, genuine employee who got the sponsor and everything. So people struggle to do that. Sometimes we have seen
Yeah,
in the like people struggle a lot of struggles that they want to get residency and they do the courses they which brings them residency and all that, but you've been on those and you are not on that journey. You were on the journey that you just focus on your career, your development,
that's
your
right.
own art of winging it. So then you just explore and that came to you. So it was kind of gifted to you just because of your passion about your career. Is that
So,
something I'm interpreting right?
um, more or less, I wouldn't say it was gifted to me because getting the company itself was really hard. So here's the
Right.
difference. When I teach, I have a lot of international students who are looking to stay in this country, right? And they always say, Kaushik, what can we do? What sort of advice can you give us that you did 20 years ago or 15 years ago when you came to Australia?
Absolutely. Yep.
So one of the things I do, Krunal, and I still do today, is I will annoy and pester companies, and I don't
Right.
care about their precious time. I will send. So when I was finishing my PhD, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know who would be my prospective employer. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
anything. But 6 months before, something just hit me to wing it. And then I just did a spreadsheet of like 500 companies from the ASX and consulting companies. And I emailed all of them and I called
500
all of
companies.
them. Yeah, yeah. I called all of them and I said, I didn't say give me a job,
Mm-hmm.
but my communication was very clear in terms of what I wanted, but also what I could offer.
Wow.
But my expectation was that out of the 500, maybe 10% might show some interest, maybe
Mm-hmm.
5% might say come in for a chat, maybe 2% might take it to the next step, 1% might click. I was looking for that 1%,
That's
and with
it.
500 you will get that 1%. So what I tell the students is you have to be persistent, you have to be ready to be proactive. You shouldn't be worried if you're annoying someone because everyone has time. They say they're busy, but everyone has time. And you've got to show your value for money. So what's in it for them? Because they know what's in it for you, but you need to tell them what's in it for them. So that's the approach, Krunal, that I've taken. Yeah.
Yep. So what you suggest to new students, like let's say students or temporary visa holders,
Yep.
and they want to achieve something high in Australia and work towards the path you have chosen. So what could be your suggestion? So that's one thing I can take away, for those
Mm.
students that okay, hassle the companies, try your best, but just for their own development, what should they do? So see, the thought process you're having in your mind is quite intense, that people don't have it.
True. Agreed.
So
My wife says the
I
same thing.
want to, yes, please. Could you please say something about it?
Sure. I just said my wife says the same thing. She says, Kaushik, you're a weird character. Not everyone can think like that, which is she was actually
No,
one of
no,
the
no, absolutely not. See, I'm a migration agent, and I meet a
yeah, you are.
lot of people,
Yep.
and I do one-on-one session, like live sessions and all that. But
Yep.
still, I have very few, and those people like you that leaves a footprint in your mind. So I can't forget this conversation ever. So, yes, can you please?
Sure, sure, Krunal. I'll do
Okay.
my best, and then just tell me
That's
if you want me to make it more simpler. Um,
fine.
I think so. This is my honest opinion.
Yeah,
If we come, if a student comes here looking for migration,
yeah,
we need to the person needs to be really clear why they want that piece of paper, why they
right,
want that residency, right?
right,
So there's
yeah,
two ways of thinking about it. You come in here thinking about the residency, or you come in here thinking about yourself. Because if you come in here thinking about the residency, you should be willing to compromise on anything and everything. You've got to think about what you need to study to get you the points, to get you that paper, to get you that residency, to get you that quality of life that you're looking for. But the other
right,
pathway is just my pathway is what do you want to do with yourself? Do you want to do business? Like do you want to study accounting because you actually want to help the world balance its books? Or do you want to study accounting because it's one of the top rated points by the Australian government immigration department?
right,
Do you want to study doctorate because you want to make a lot of money? Or do you want to study doctor because you want to save people's lives? So that is really important, Krunal. It comes down to looking internally. I do a lot of talks promoting my book at the moment, and one of the lessons that I always tell the students and others is follow your dot. This is actually the
yeah,
title of my presentation. And I just want to take 2 minutes to share
yeah,
with your
sure,
audience and yourself what this means. Because this is
yeah,
something that a lot of students, as I've spoken in India, Mauritius, and Australia in the last 2 months,
hmm,
collectively across the three continents, all students have had the same reaction, which
excellent.
is,
They're
whoa,
all
is
humans.
that,
Yes,
are you serious? So here's the here's the example.
yes, please.
When I started my PhD, I wanted to change the world, Krunal.
Yeah,
I wanted to be everything for everyone. When you do a PhD, Krunal, you don't just need to have a plan, but you also need to have a really good title, something that
yeah,
engages your students and your, people who want to read your PhD, so they know what it's about. So it's got to be really
correct.
engaging. So I came up with a title that was 25 words long. I thought it was amazing. So I emailed it to my supervisor and I said, here's the title of my PhD. He replied with one sentence, which is something I think we all dread to get from our bosses, which was, "Come see me in my office tomorrow." So the next day I went and saw him in his office. I was really scared, like had I done something wrong. He
Wrong.
said,
Yeah.
"Sit down." I sat down. And then he said, "Is this your title?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you trying to change the world?" And I said, "Yes." I wasn't really trying to change the entire world, but I wanted to have a big impact. He said, "Give me that white sheet of paper and pencil." So I gave it to him. He drew a circle on that paper. And then he said, "Kaushik, the white space in this circle represents the depth and breadth of knowledge that exists in this universe." He then took
Right.
the pencil and put a dot in that circle. And then he looked at me and said, "Kaushik, that dot is you. That is the impact your PhD is going to have. And that is probably the impact you will have in your entire life. So stop trying to be the white space in that circle and just focus on the dot and be happy with that." Now, initially, Krunal, when he told me that, I was shocked. It was like a slap in the face. But then
Right.
as I thought about it, I realized it's actually one of the best pieces of feedback I've ever received in my entire life. Because what I realized from that advice is that I can't be everything for everyone. I can't do everything for everyone. I need to think about my little dot where I can have impact, whether it's with my wife, my colleagues, my team, and then block everything else out because it's simply just a distraction. When you focus on the dot and it's achievable, it'll give you a lot of happiness and satisfaction. But when you want to be the entire white space, that's when you get stress, anxiety, health, mental health issues, etc. This is something I've shared with students in Melbourne last week, in Mauritius last month, and in India in December. And the
Wow.
students reacted in a similar fashion, which was just the look that you're giving me. Now, when I
Yes.
think
It's
about your
fascinating.
clients and students coming to Australia itself is stressful because
It
you're
is.
coming
It is.
here on a mission in a new territory, new environment, no friends, potentially no family, and you're here on a mission to become a resident. But if
Yes.
you're coming in here with that baggage, it's setting you up to potentially have a lot of stress because nobody knows how the world is going to shift tomorrow. Nobody
No.
expected the pandemic, this inflationary
Exactly.
pressures. Companies are going to
Yep.
lay off a lot of people in the coming months in Australia.
Yep.
So it's going to get worse before it gets better. Now imagine
You're
a
right.
student in a university trying to focus on a course thinking about their future. It's not easy, right? So
Yep.
my feedback, if you ask me for one simple piece of feedback, it is for your clients or the people you work with or mentor and guide. It is for them to think about their dot. And everything else, whether it works out or not, it's okay. Because as the subtitle of my book says, what's the worst thing that can happen? Seriously, what's the worst thing that can happen, Kernal? Imagine the families in Syria.
Yes. Yes. In yes, just the earthquake happened, and plus whatever happened plus this earthquake. That's the yes. You're right. You're right. I
Perspective.
don't. Yes. Yes.
It's okay
Yeah. Mm.
if, and I know you're a migration agent, but I guess if you want my candid feedback to everyone is always to think what's the worst thing that can happen? And if it's not that bad, it's okay. Maybe you can overcome it. Maybe you'll find a
Correct.
plan B, maybe you'll find a plan C. And if you don't, go back to where you came from and make a difference there.
Start again. Start again. Yes, yes. And see, this is yeah. I think that should be a life changer. Like thing for everybody. I would say that, because what could go worse? And this is the worst thing. Like yeah, you're right. That's nothing worse getting beaten up 365 days by six boys on a bed. And like what can go wrong? You're right. And then where I came from and the where I came from and where I'm right now, what can go wrong? You're right.
I'll give you an
Absolutely right.
example, another one if you're interested
Now I'm just
in
thinking about myself. Like where I came from is enough. And this is like best example for me. Like what can go wrong? You're right.
in
Absolutely.
in February 2020, Krunal, the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
hit us, right? COVID
Yep.
pandemic, it started.
Yep.
In March 2020, my dad went into ICU in India, not for COVID, something much worse than COVID. In April 2020, I was supposed to go back to take care of them because I'm an only child. All
Yep.
flights were cancelled. So I didn't know if I would see him again. And my mom is
Wow.
alone and she's pretty sick as well. In May 2020, from my dream job where I was doing great, it was awesome, I was given 2 days' notice to pack my bags and leave.
Just 2 days.
2 days. 35% of the head office, their roles were made redundant, including mine. My wife doesn't work. Came back to already in the apartment working from home. And I just went to the room and I told her, guess what? I've lost my job. Single income family. My dad's probably about to die. I have no, and she doesn't work. She has some health issues. So, Krunal, here's the beautiful bit. In August
Yeah.
2020, I got a job that doubled my salary, and I got a
Whoa.
job when companies were not hiring. But that's not the fun bit. What happened between May and August was the best 3 or 4 months of my professional career. And one of the reasons the book was written, there's a chapter on that. And my wife said, you've done this in 4 months when anyone else would have probably killed themselves because the
Correct.
situation was so
Already
bad
stressed.
or had
Yeah.
stress or whatever, right? It affected me for 2 hours when I was made redundant. But it was the best. The next 3 4 months was the best. But if you think about it, during the pandemic, millions and millions of people suffered, and rightfully
Yeah.
so. Many couldn't see their families when they died. Many had health issues. Many lost their jobs. There were so
Yeah.
many, socioeconomic issues around the world. What I'm saying
Right.
is, my approach is not for everyone. But I guess every time you're down, remember you're down, but you're not out. So you can always get back up and make some
Yep.
impact. So that is my feedback.
Correct. Great. What? So, it- I don't know. Like, is that something you've been made to get these challenges and make over it, or because this example is recent example, right? So we are not talking about that
Yeah.
the US examples or anything. So this is recent 2020. So and
Mm.
I don't know like what energy is throwing that to you, and you just challenging whatever the situation comes around you, and just beating it like with the triple the energy you have. Wow, great. So how you develop this? Tell me something about it. I'm flat. I don't have words to questions to ask now.
Uh, I think if you think about yourself, your journey to
Yes.
Australia, your clients, we all go through very hard times, Krunal. We will all go
Yeah.
through hard times at some point in our life, and we've all been through hard times. So I think my story is not different to yours or to anyone else's. It's just that we have different ways or different things that happen to us. And it's
Correct.
the difference is what we do with those situations and how we use it as a weapon in our mind for the future. So
Yeah.
when I was four in Nigeria, in Lagos, at
Mm-hmm.
midnight, armed robbers broke into our house, took an AK-47 and put it on my head. And they told my mom and dad, give us the gold or dollars, otherwise your only child gets a bullet in the head. At
Oh,
four, I think at six, and at eight. 3 times this happened to me.
3 times.
3 times. At 13, near plane crash, 45 seconds away from crashing into the waters between Florida and Texas in a United Airlines and finished.
Oh,
Physical bullying, right? Mental bullying, racism in America,
racist.
in
Let's
Australia.
talk about that. What is the feeling in Australia about racism? We don't, like back in 2008, 9, 10, we have heard a lot of incidences. One of my guests was talking about racism
Right.
on the podcast. They've been beaten in a tram or something. And
Mm,
and so what's your experiences? Could you please, no, if you don't mind sharing?
of course, I'd be happy to. For me, fortunately, there has been no physical kind of racism event in Australia, but there's
Right.
been a lot of emotional. So people will yell at me on the streets. They will say certain things. which
Right.
are very common words that you'll see in the newspapers when there's a racial attack on an Indian.
Yep. Yep.
But
Yep.
this is the best part. This is the part that I
Okay.
want your people to know, which is
Please.
in corporate Australia, there is a lot of subtle racism, whether we like it or not. I mean, if you think about Australia, it's the land of Indigenous Australians.
Correct.
Do you see any Indigenous Australians around you?
Very
Not
less.
many.
Maybe one or two.
One
When
or
you go
two.
to train stations, yes, you might see some, but yes, not that many in Melbourne. If you
But
really
when
want
you,
to explore the
mm,
culture, then yes, Sunny Coast. When I was in Sunny Coast, I see,
okay,
more, but here in Melbourne, Sydney, no. Uh,
not many. You think about who built Australia, Krunal?
my
Which
opinion
community?
is British community, British migrants, I would say.
A migrant community, right?
Yes.
A migrant community built this country, and I think beyond British, it's the other migrants who made it what it is today. And
Right.
I guess my point is that we are all the same. But
Yes.
the interesting thing is, I find this a lot. Maybe it's my face. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it's my face. Maybe it's the size of my body. I don't know. But when I go to a conference, when I go to events,
Hmm.
there is a 70 to 80% likelihood that I will encounter subtle racism. And here's one example, if you would like.
Yes, please.
A very famous law firm in
Hmm.
Melbourne, headquartered. I went to an event there 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I don't know when. It was a United Nations event, of all things. I went up. I was the only non Caucasian person who walked in. There was a room full
Hmm.
of them.
Yep.
Was not acknowledged, and I didn't expect to be acknowledged. I'm not Anthony Albanese or Scott Morrison, so who am I? So
Right.
I
Right.
walked over to a group of 6 people standing around in a circle. They wouldn't give me space to enter that circle to have a chat. They just stood and they had the chat, and I was standing behind one of them trying to get into the conversation. They didn't let me. One person left after maybe 3, 4 minutes. I'm just standing there, but I enjoy the situation. Someone else might feel awkward. I loved it.
Right.
The one person left, and I took their spot. Didn't acknowledge me, didn't ask me my name, where I'm from, nothing. There was a lady
Okay.
standing next to me, very elderly,
Hmm.
who was telling everyone how amazing she was.
Hmm.
At some point, she asked me, "Oh, hey, who are you?" And I said, "This is who I am." That's it. Turned her face away. I think she couldn't pronounce my name, so she gave up. And then at some point, she told someone, "Oh, I'm doing a PhD." And they said, "Oh, that's a great thing you're doing a PhD." And she said, "Yeah, I'm doing it really well. I'm doing it so fast. I'm going to get it done in 6 years." And then so this is my little side coming in when I said, "Oh, it's taking you 6 years. I did mine in 2.5 years. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And I'm going now to talk on the stage." Um, so I love these situations. But when you think about a
Perfect.
student going to network, it can be overwhelming.
Yes.
You're going
Yes.
in to try and get a job or get a name or get a business card or get a number to try and have a coffee to get that internship, to get the residency, etc. It's not easy. This is not an
No.
easy country. When I was made redundant, I wrote an article, two-part series that was published in a magazine, which was called It's Not Who You Know, It's What You Know. And the reason I wrote that, Krunal, is in Australia, it's
Mm.
all about who you know. It's not about what you know. And that is the
Yes.
sad truth. You go to university and get a
That's
degree, for what? No one cares
that's it.
about your resume. They just want to know if you know someone who knows someone. So my feedback is that for your audience, for students, continue sticking to your education, build your knowledge base, because one day it'll come in really handy, but
Hmm.
have a bit of a bulletproof vest because the community will test
Will
it.
try. Yes, you're right. You're right. And is this thing like, okay, if I'm from one of my client, let's say if I'm advocating this for one of my clients. So if something happens, like if somebody goes to the stage, as you said, like in this community, then is that everybody's like that, or it's just certain number of people that do that racism thing? I just wanted to know the ratio. Like, what is the ratio in corporate world?
Oh, it's not much, maybe I've been too harsh. It's not a big number, definitely not a big number. I think it's a small number. I think the majority are quite inclusive. Um, they certainly are starting to realize that this world is a globalized, multicultural world because I think Australia is a village to the world.
Yes, yes,
Australia is
you're right.
disconnected from reality.
No. Yep,
This is a
yep.
different dimension.
Could you
But
please elaborate
slowly,
upon that as well? Like
well,
how you feel like other third world other countries and Australia, like how other progressive countries or already progressed countries and Australia, how they see Australia. What is the vision for Australia?
I think they see Australia as a maybe like a fast follower. They see Australia as a bit of a village, very
Mm-hmm.
backward kind of a country that's very peaceful and easy and lazy. That's how
Mm-hmm.
Australia is viewed. Like when we view America, we have a certain
Right.
opinion on the United States, right?
Yeah.
Racist, sometimes idiotic kind of. So there's
Yeah.
different opinions. Now, I'm not saying either opinion is right or wrong. I'm just
You're
saying that
right.
those are sort of opinions, when we have an opinion about India, we have an opinion about China, we have an opinion about New Zealand, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe, though, in the corporate sense, Australia, if we didn't have, say, the resources sector or the mining
Mm-hmm.
industry, Australia wouldn't be where it is today. No doubt, with the pandemic, Australia would have been destroyed economically, financially, etc. I just came from Mauritius. My wife is from Mauritius, a little island. They were
Yep.
built on the sugarcane industry, tea plantations, etc. That's been wiped out because other countries are getting it cheaper. All
Mm-hmm.
Mauritius has is tourism and financial services. If you look at Australia, we've got a bit of tourism. We've
Yep.
got a few kind of sectors that are reasonably booming, but mining and resources what keeps the heart beating and the
Beating.
money flowing into Australia. So if we didn't have that, if you take all countries and remove some of these things and then just measure it based on people, intellectual capability, capacity, etc., I think
Mm-hmm.
Australia is more of a fast follower, but a more relaxed, chilled approach to things, which I think is great. Nobody wants a stressful day-to-day lifestyle. So in that way, I
No.
think Australia is amazing. It's a great
Yep.
place to be, and absolutely, it's a very healthy place to live. But
Yes.
from a corporate sense, I truly believe that more and more people are accepting the fact that it is a multicultural corporate community and it's going
Mm-hmm.
to become more that way. Obviously, in Silicon Valley, you have so many Indian CEOs, which
Yeah.
we haven't seen much in Australia. In fact, I would like to
Yes.
see more indigenous CEOs or indigenous board members rather than Indians. But
Yeah.
anyway, it doesn't matter which or who. But I think Australia has a bit to go in that way. But definitely the number is much smaller. It's not a big number in
Much
terms
more.
of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
subtle races. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Great. See, on this note, I've got a sub question for this.
Sure.
So, yes, I have similar opinion about Australia from someone else, and even I'm thinking on that way that Australia is not a manufacturing country. We are importing a lot, and
Mm,
right now we are relying on this mining, maybe this student industry, tourism industry,
mm.
and not much. So how you see Australia for next 20, 30 years in the terms of sustainability, financial sustainability, or this, multicultural sustainability or social one, so what's your opinion on that? That's something I wanted to like discuss with someone, but now I got I
You
got
got
you,
me.
so yeah. Yes,
uh,
so it is. See, I've been telling I'll be upfront on camera that I've been telling my family members, I've got a massive family here in Australia.
sure.
All my cousins and everyone's here. So I've been telling them the way Australia going, because we are not manufacturing anything, and the relationship with China is not, I'm not sure like how's it's going, but yeah, it's not going great. I can see that from the news. But so in that terms, now India is coming into the picture and all that, but still we are not manufacturing anything. And if you cannot manufacture, if you're not manufacturing, you can't sustain in this market. And look at the gap we have, the traveling and the shipping and all that. So I've been telling them that 2030 we might regret coming to Australia. Is that going to be the case? Am I right or not?
Um, if only I had a crystal ball. It's interesting you mentioned that, Krunal. A lot of things that we're discussing is giving me a lot of flashbacks. What I
Yeah.
actually wrote another article, I think it
Right.
was just before the pandemic or just after the pandemic, and it was picked up. It was picked up by I think one of the newspapers, and it was called "Is Australia a Third World Country?"
Hmm.
That was the title of my article. I can send you the link later if you like. In that one, I
Yes.
actually did
Thank
an
you.
analysis of Australia based on a few metrics, right? Some of the things
Yeah.
that I've already discussed today, but also
Yeah.
from a human capital, social capital, manufacturing capital, intellectual capital, etc. Some of the typical capitals we look at when we measure success, not just GDP.
No.
And so I can't predict 2030, 2040, but here's what I can say with,
Hmm.
I guess, an informed opinion would be
Correct.
that with the geopolitical risks that are happening, with the tensions that we have with some of our neighbors, with some of the pressures, even on the resources industry at the moment, with the war in Ukraine and potentially upcoming wars in other parts of the world, and with, I'm sure there's going to be more pandemics in the, I hope not, but there will be.
Yeah.
Australia really needs to look inward at itself.
Hmm.
Sometimes we tell humans, you need to look at yourself in the mirror.
Right.
Someone
Right.
who's being mean or someone who's saying the wrong
Yep.
things, say, look at yourself in the mirror and take a reality
Yep.
check. Do you really
Correct.
think you are that? Or do you think you're someone else? And do you need to be someone else? So I think Australia, this is probably a really good time just to look in the mirror and just take a stock take of what makes its economy tick. Why the real estate price is so high and the cliff
Hmm.
that we're about to fall off in March, or it's already starting in Feb with the interest rate rises. I truly believe by 2030, Australia will not look the way it looks today.
Right.
It could
So
be
it's
better, it could be
could be better,
worse.
could be worst. Yes. So it we are on the cliff, right? Exactly.
It
So
depends. We're at a tipping point.
if you do it, if you make it, and if you make the right decisions as a
That's right.
country, if you make a right
Exactly.
decision, then we could be on the other side. But if
Yeah.
any wrong decision, yeah, can go
There's a lot of
pear-shaped.
smart
Yeah.
people here, and all these students coming in, right? They're the next
Yes.
generation, they're the future
Yes.
leaders. So they can really come and help the country make a difference in the world.
Yes.
The
Yes.
last thing
Yes.
you want is, the home country becoming more attractive than Australia, where they all start going back after the education, which is what's happening with US and India, right? Many of the Indians are going
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
India,
Yeah.
taking the
You're
Harvard
right.
education, everything, going to India and starting a billion-dollar startup, which I think is awesome as well, speaking as an Australian Indian. But I think
Yep.
Australia needs to find a better way to retain talent,
You're
and
right.
use it to really help shape the country to get ready for the next stage.
I'll tell you this. I was listening to another podcast, US podcast, and the guy was
Yeah.
asking this question that what US is doing, and we are doing similar, we are claiming that we have the best universities in the world, top ranking, and blah blah blah,
Hmm.
So we invite students to come here, they study here, and after that, we are not offering them residency, and they have to go back. We force them to go back, and if
That's right.
we force them or not, when they go back, then their home countries get the result of the top class education we are claiming here, and what we are getting is just tuition fees and taxes and all
That's
that.
right.
That's it. Right. So as a country, we are just making producing the talents and just
Mm,
sending them out to their home countries, and
mm,
they make wonders in their home countries. So
that's right.
that's I think that you're right and you're absolutely right. So that's what's happening. Yep. So we have to change the strategy, and
Hmm.
hopefully that's not your my job. The government might do it.
Fingers
But
crossed.
yes, you're right. The decision is, that makes a huge difference. That if they make a right decision, then yes, that's something they have to, yeah, that could change the Australia overall perspective. So I know the time is limited with you, but I'll ask you this few last questions. That
Sure.
what's your opinion on success? like how a person can be successful in Australia. Let's say I want you to guide students or new migrants who just recently got the residency, and
Mhm.
yes, exceptional career is one story. But let's say people are not in exceptional career; they are in a normal jobs. So, what's your advice to them as a new migrant or a new student in this country when they come in here? What they can do to successively, progress through their career and get a good life in Australia?
Mhm. So here's something that I share quite a bit with people that I speak to, Krunal.
Great.
And this might
Perfect.
be a little bit left field for you based on the question you just asked me, but just bear with me.
Please.
I always tell people embrace failure.
You're right.
Embrace
Right.
failure. It's okay to fail because in order to have something you never had before, you need to do something you've never done before,
Absolutely.
if that makes sense. So
Yep.
we all fail. I have failed a lot in my life, but the failures have been the stepping stone to my successes. The key thing is as we fail, the important thing is we need to learn from it and stay
Mm-hmm.
motivated from it and keep persevering. Professionally, we have to push ourselves. We
Yep.
have to push ourselves. This is something that I would tell your student community. Push yourself. There's actually an old IQ test which has 9 dots. And the challenge is to take a pencil and draw 5 lines
Mm-hmm.
within those 9 dots without lifting the pencil. And the only way to do that is to go outside the box. So the feedback is for your community to think outside the box. And it is to dream
Right.
and dream big, but also have goals. Because
Mm.
dreams without goals is a huge stepping stone to disappointment.
Right.
So when you think about the definition of success, I would say to your students or to anyone else, success is what you make for yourself and how you define it for yourself. So for
Right.
me, my success is my dot. I think about what my dot is, I define it, I
Mm-hmm.
plan for it, and then I think about how I'm going to allocate my time to do it. So my dots,
Right.
these are my dots at the moment. My wife,
Perfect. Right.
she's my first dot. So if I keep her happy, that's success.
That success. Yep.
My second dot, my full-time job and my team. So when they succeed and the company succeeds, I succeed. So that's my second dot.
Pretty
My
much.
third dot is my teaching. I teach at one university. When my students learn a lot about corporate governance, which is what I teach, and
Mm-hmm.
they actually ask a lot of questions and they're engaged and they provide really good feedback, that is my measure of success on teaching. My fourth one is my writing. I write
Mm-hmm.
on ESG for some magazine, and the
Yep.
more questions and feedback and engagement I get through that, I realize that that dot is also a success. These are
Perfect.
my 4 or 5 dots, right? So for the students to be successful in Australia, it's really important for them to know, do they want to do one dot and nail it in the short term? Do they want 5 dots and nail 5 dots, or it might lead to distractions? Or do they want 10 dots? So it comes down to each student and each professional that you work with for them to actually sit back and think about, what do I want to achieve in my life and what success means to me. You might have only one dot, and that's enough. For
That's
me, if my
enough.
wife is not happy, Krunal, that will destroy all the other dots. And that's not a
You're right.
joke.
You're
Happy
right.
wife is a happy life, right?
Oh,
So you
oh
focus
yes.
on the main dot and you
Yes.
prioritize everything else to make sure that first dot is happy. So it's the same thing I would say with the students. You're new into the corporate workforce. You've just finished a degree. You're
Yep.
excited. You're hungry. You're ambitious. You want to achieve a lot. What's really important is maintaining that ambition with the same level of well-being. As long as they're
Okay.
both together and equal, then you will continue doing great things in the medium to long term. The last thing you want is to get fatigued in by the time you're 30, and then you kind of lose interest in a profession that you used to be very passionate about. So for me, that was
Yeah.
tennis. That was my lesson to myself. But for
Mm-hmm.
the young people, I think it's to maintain fun in whatever it is they do, focus on one or two dots and do it really well, and everything else will take care of itself.
Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. That's something, this is a great piece of advice for my viewers, and that will help
Thank
them.
you.
And who come here, from the different backgrounds, and when they encounter these sort of, stories, and then they don't have the proper guidance. And these words, I think, help each of my viewers and students, and even I post them on the social media as well. So at least the word will go around, and people have that great insight that what could be done and what can help them in making great career, great migration story in Australia. So fabulous, Dr. Kaushik. Thank you so much for that. And last question for this podcast I would ask is, so you have been in
Sure.
Australia for more than 17 years,
17.
right?
That's
17
correct.
years, right? And you have seen that, migration journey and everything.
Yeah.
So this is the most common question I ask to my every guest, that if you have some sort of ability to change something in the Australian migration policies, or if you have a suggestion for the Australian migration policies, what one thing that you could suggest to the department, that this would be a best migrant policy for future migrants, or even for the Australia itself?
Um, it's a great question. Um, I'm I'm a bit disconnected with the policy at the moment, but my basic feedback to the powers that be would be policy should align with what's needed within Australia. And one of the biggest issues that we're facing in the world is the war on talent.
Yeah.
If the policy was right, would we have a war on talent?
No. No, we are at this moment we are struggling. At this moment, Australia is struggling for the talents. You're right,
For the
absolutely right. I
talents,
was,
right?
I was listening to the Department of Home Affairs Minister, and she was saying that we want to, do something about the carbon sustainability, like the carbon emission and all that. But
Yep,
we don't have people to fill the gaps of normal engineers. Then how we, talk about the research and sustainability? We can't even fill the gaps. So that's where we are right now.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's you made such a good point, Krunal, and that's it. So if we know what the issues are, addressing the policy to close the gap shouldn't be um, it should be a no-brainer, right?
Right.
But that's where
Right.
politics comes in. So I would say sometimes we have to keep politics aside, easier said than done, and
Yeah.
just get with it. And that's why I've always worked in a corporate and I've never worked in government. Corporates
Wow.
get on with it because we have
Right.
a expectation from shareholders and we need to
Yeah.
look at the bottom line. Governments are a little bit different.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you for your time, Dr. Kaushik. It's
Thanks,
it's
Colonel.
great insight. You have, I don't want to stop this, but your time is limited. That's why I let
That's
you
okay.
go. But yes, this is something very insightful session we have today, and off the camera, I just want to invite you, just to join us, anytime, whenever you get chance, and whenever
Sure.
you have a time to be with us. And that your words are so intense, and the experiences you have gone through, so that made you that powerful, I would say that. And this is something extraordinary piece of advice, extraordinary piece of insight from the different view that people get out of your words. So yes, I recommend everybody to read the book. And so
Thank you.
if somebody wants to buy that book, where they can buy?
Yeah, thanks for the thanks for the promotion, Colonel. So the book,
No, it's no
it's
promotion. I just want to buy. That's why I'm asking.
thank you. So the book is found on Amazon. It's
Okay,
on
cool.
amazon.com.au if you're in Australia or India or US. It's called The Art of Winging It.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's only been out for 3 months now, and the
Mm-hmm.
feedback from it's been selling all over the world, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. But I really would like feedback, from people like yourselves and your clients, because one of
Yeah.
the triggers of writing this book is actually targeting the student community, the migrant community, and the
Migrant
young
community.
professionals community. That's the
Right.
target market for this book because there's some stuff in there that might make you initially get nervous. I mean, you just called me intense.
Yeah.
In the book, when you read it, the first time the reaction is it's intense, but then as you think through it, there's some stuff in there that if you apply in your day to day, it'll make life much easier.
Much easier. Absolutely, I get it. I get it. And that's why, So, yeah, I will post the review, I make a separate reel. When I finish reading the book, I'll make a separate reel and I'll post my
Thank
review
you. Oh,
yes, please. And for my viewers as well and for your viewers too. But yes, so I will thank you very much for the information, and I would love to have you on my next podcast, and maybe if you are around
anytime. I think
Melbourne,
you're
I
amazing,
would.
Krunal. You're a great
No,
guy.
no, thanks for that. I'm trying to help, but something, that's what happens. When the great speaker comes in, then I get, for myself, I get great insight. I get
Sure,
some any small takeaway from each podcast. I just do that, and yours is amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaushik. Thanks for joining us,
thanks, Krunal.
and yes, please, I will welcome you anytime whenever you get a chance. Please get connected to us, and we are happy to
Sure.
have a session with you.
Thanks, Krunal. Thanks for having me. This was
Thanks.
an absolute
Same
pleasure.
here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.